So in today's video, we're going to talk about 2024 releases. I made like an unofficial goal this year of reading new release books. I've never pushed myself to read books like this before, mostly because I don't want to purchase these brand new books, but I was really good about using my library and holds and all of these things. And so of the 70-ish books I've read so far, 15 of them have been new release books. So that's like a little bit more than 20%. So for me, that's hitting my goal. And so in this video, I'm going to look back on that. I'm going to look back and ask the question of was it worth it? Because there's so much hype and new books and excitement, but is that how I want to spend my reading time? These are the questions I'm asking myself. And so stay tuned and we'll see how it went. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel. Welcome back, all the things. So like I said, we're looking at 2024 book releases this year. And if I think they were worth my time, if I think it was worth the effort to put in all of these library holds and pay attention to new releases, because I feel like I get very excited about some of these books, but then these are also some of the books I was most let down by. And so let's talk about them. Like I said, I have 15 books to talk about. What I'll start with the ones that I did not like and I was most disappointed in. And then we'll do the ones I loved, and then we'll do kind of the rest, the leftovers, if you will. And so I don't have any of these books to talk about. If I did happen to purchase them, I don't have them. The first one I want to talk about is probably my least favorite. Not totally. I have two books that I've just really disliked this year. One was a 2023 book, so I'm not going to talk about it in this video. But I did read A Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel L. Jensen, and I didn't like it, and I have talked about that so much on this channel. I fell into the romantasy hype for this book, but not only that, I really do like Viking books, and I have found some other ones that I have really liked since then, but this one fell flat mostly because of our main character and the discrepancy between an adult romantasy book with a young, immature main character. That doesn't jive for me. It doesn't work. I don't like feeling like our main character is like 15 years old doing these very adult things and then having to kind of be in her head as she is thinking all the time about this man when there are like these bloody wars going on around her, and you're just like, this makes no sense to me. So this book was a huge fail. It was a huge fail. A couple of the other books on here were thrillers, which thrillers are hit or miss, and that's okay. I've always viewed thrillers as there's a potential I'm not going to like them. One of those was Murder Road by Simone St. James. I just didn't like this book. I liked the aspect of it. I liked the premise of there's this haunted highway and this newlywed couple gets sucked down this highway and they don't really realize why they're driving this way until they see this woman on the side of the road who's hurt, and they pick her up and take her to the hospital, and then she dies, and then they become the main suspects. It didn't totally make sense. There was some very creepy moments. Simone St. James really does write creepy supernatural moments really well, and so that was good. It had a lot of predictability and a lot of annoyance. I was a little bit annoyed at the main characters and how things were playing out, and it didn't make as much logical sense to me. So that was not a favorite 2024 release, along with the Kate Alice Marshall. See, I've forgotten. These were from the beginning of the year. No One Can Know. All right. I've never read Kate Alice Marshall before, but I know she has a popular book that people were talking about, and I should have just started there instead of starting with her new release. No One Can Know had a lot to do with, I think it was sisters, that something happened in their past in their family home, and then they all spread out, and then one of the sisters is desperate and has to go back to the family house, and the past is drudged back up. The past being their parents were murdered in the house and what actually happened. It had some interesting moments, but it was just kind of forgettable and kind of not my favorite. So that one. A couple others. What was it called? The Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Fazal. I never say her name right, which I always feel bad about. So A Tempest of Tea. Now this had potential. I thought it sounded so interesting because it had to do with this tea shop for vampires, right? So instead of serving tea, well, it did. It served tea during the day, and then at night it served blood for its vampire customers. Okay, so that was just interesting to me, and as was the setting. And I thought the setting could have been done so much better too, where the tension of the police being against the vampires and maybe against the woman who's running this tea shop. Now, I did like our main character in the sense that she had a strong personality. But the way the story was told and the way things worked out in the end, I'm just like, no, I didn't like where it went. And so I'm like, no, I'm not going to read the rest of it. I still do have We Hunt the Flames, and I think that'll be a better series for me just based on the general premise. So I'm not giving up on the author. I just didn't really like this book. Okay, but I would say probably my most disappointed book. I was just so excited for this book, you guys. I was so excited for The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I really do like Leigh Bardugo's writing. I always forget that first series, the one that comes before Six of Crows. I'm working my way through that. I still have the third book and that one to read. I should just read it. It's a pretty quick read. And that way I can reread Six of Crows. But I like Leigh Bardugo. I've enjoyed it. And then she went and wrote an adult historical fantasy. And I'm like, yes, that's my bread and butter. I really love historical fantasies. This book, though, it had to do with Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. So historically speaking, that's so interesting, like just how brutal that time frame was. And then the fact that if you had magic or powers, you were targeted, right? And you were imprisoned and bad things happened to you. And our main character has some of that, and she's being used by her mistress that she works for. And it kind of goes up the chain and it goes to this trial, but the trials were kind of like meh. The love interest, I guess it was a love interest, wasn't my favorite either. I just didn't think it made as much sense. I felt like, here's what I felt. I felt like it was very well researched, which I liked, but I don't feel like that research made its way into the story in a very useful way. In a way that actually either brought the environment to life or brought the characters to life. I felt like it just kind of missed each other, the plot plus the setting. It could have been really cool. It just wasn't. So those are some 2025 books that were not my favorite or very much disappointing, as opposed to some 2024 books that I loved. These ones to be precise, were the ones I loved. I mean, the newest, Kristen Hanna. We'll start with that. The Women. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed it. It has to do with this combat nurse in Vietnam during a time when women were just not acknowledged as being part of the war. They were just like helpers, and so they didn't really need the veteran services when they came home because they weren't really there. And so it really highlights that time frame, and it did such an excellent job of highlighting what it would have felt to be a combat nurse in that situation when it was just so bloody. The guerrilla style and the poison gases and just terrible things that were happening in the field, and what the nurses had to deal with and how they had to help but not lose themselves. And it was so good. And then just also the re-entry back into America was, it just kind of broke your heart, even though this character was infuriating in a lot of ways. But it kind of all made sense if you consider like mental health and things. And so it was really good. I am definitely a Kristen Hanna fan. I feel like as long as you're ready to get like your heart ripped out, then pick up her books. Another one that I loved was this one, First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. I've been talking about this for a while. It just surprised me. It's about this girl who acts kind of like a spy, but you don't know exactly much about what she's doing. She's just taken on an alias and she's pretending to date this guy to get information about some stuff that you're not quite sure. And a lot of the story is told in the past where you're getting to know how she got to be in this position. It's so very curious. I really enjoyed it. I do like spy books. I enjoyed how it wrapped up. I enjoyed putting all the pieces together. That was a favorite for 2024. Along with this one, you guys, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I'm not really a romance reader, but I'll read any Abby Jimenez just because of the way she writes. She just writes in such a real way. Like her characters are flawed and working on themselves. And yes, it still kind of follows a typical romance plot, but there's all this mental health interwoven. And the story was just so good about our main character of Emma and Justin, and Emma just kind of having a very, very hard childhood. And what that does in light of this arrangement that these two have where they found each other on like a Reddit thread saying basically that whoever they date breaks up with them and goes on to meet the love of their life. And so they decide to break the curse and date each other so they can break up and find the love of their lives. Yeah, it is good. It's clever and fun. So I really enjoyed that. The other book that is a 2024 release is the third book in the Devoured Worlds series that I just devoured. I loved this book. Like this whole series I read this summer, and I just really enjoyed the sci-fi world that was built here and the problem of this like parasite type thing taking over worlds and humanity having to fight against that and find a planet that they can live and survive on. And then there's these two main characters that are clashing, but yet there's a little bit of a romance plot in there, and I loved it. I loved it. And so those were huge 2024 hits for me. And now to go into the kind of the ones that I liked. So these tend to be 4 stars, and I'm looking at them and they're mostly thrillers, because thrillers tend to be 4 stars for me. Although this is not necessarily a thriller. This is just unto itself. Stuart Turton, I never quite know where to put his books. Sci-fi, thriller, mystery, I'm not quite sure, but I really enjoyed The Last Murder at the End of the World. I find his writing very clever. Like, you have to stick with it. It can't be a fast read. I feel like it can't be where you're expecting all these clues the whole time. It's not going to be that. And in this book in particular, it was about this island. It was like this utopia where there was this dome that was put up by the scientists to protect them against this like poisonous fog that had killed humanity, right? And so there was so many things in here that was just so interesting, and talking about humanity and how we treat our planet and all of that, on top of a really interesting main character and kind of plot as to like what the heck is going on this island, kept me reading through the entire book. And so that was a really fun 2024 book as well, along with the new Ruth Ware, One Perfect Couple, which had to do with like a reality show for couples where like the best couple wins, but you can kind of mix and match your couples. And it had a ridiculous premise. But then things started to go badly, and it started to be like really scary. Like they were stranded and somehow somebody's doing scary things. It was a fun ride. And then I did pick up the latest Riley Sager, so Middle of the Night. This was an unexpected book, and I feel like most people have said that, and some people that's a negative thing, but I enjoyed it. I had a little bit of a heads up that it was a bit creepy but sweet, and if you add the word sweet to a thriller book, it's just, I know walking into it's going to be a little different. And it had to do with our main character who, in his past, he was tenting in his backyard with his best friend, and he woke up to a slash in the tent, and his best friend was missing and gone forever. And now our main character is back in town, and strange things are happening that make him really even question whether his best friend's still alive. Maybe he's still in town, like what's going on? And I thought it was really good. It did have a sweet, creepy tone to it. So I 100% agree with that assessment, and that allowed me to really enjoy it. Along with this one, which I also think some people didn't love, but I did. It's called The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I like this way more than The Silent Patient. I like stories that are told in this manner. I think that's what it is for me. So if you have any other books that are similar to this, where there's kind of a narrator that breaks the fourth wall a bit, which talks to the audience, but you're not quite sure who this narrator is, so you're kind of wondering that the whole time. Or how truthful said narrator is, right? You have to ask all those questions. And it's about the story of this actress, this retired actress who is taking her closest friends to like her private island for Easter to celebrate. But then there's a murder and it all kind of unravels. What I like though is it's told kind of like an onion. That's the best way I can describe it. The whole story is told kind of one time through. And then it's told again from either a different perspective or with different information. It doesn't switch perspectives. That's incorrect. It's just told with more information or with a little bit of backstory. And so now you know the backstory. So now you hear the story again and you see it through different eyes. And it does that a number of times. And I just really, really enjoy that because you're not quite sure if your initial assumptions are still true. For me, it's a kind of a clever back and forth. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really fun. All right, and then I do have 2 more books that I read this year that are 2024 releases that are just fine. They're neither in one category or the other. The first was The Prisoner's Throne, I think. So this is the Holly Black book. It's kind of the 5th book. It's the final book in the duology in the whole kind of Folk of the Air series. It's nowhere near as good as the initial like trilogy, the Cruel Prince trilogy that I just really enjoyed. But it was fine. It was entertaining. I liked the characters. I just didn't like them nearly as much as I liked the original kind of cast of characters. And so it was fine. So I read that. I also read Two Sides to Every Murder by, I think, Daniel Valentine. It was fine. It was kind of a YA thriller. like a summer camp slasher is the best way I could describe it. And it was entertaining, but I think I was just the wrong target audience. I am not a slasher movie watcher, so it's like that trope isn't something that I just enjoy, and so it kind of seemed silly. That was the best description when I read it. I was like, this is kind of silly. And so that was okay. I mean, I didn't dislike it in a strong way. I was entertained. I just was like, well, okay. So those are kind of round out my reading for 2024. Is that I really feel like it's a split. It's a split of books that I just really loved and books that I just really disliked. But I'd say on the whole, if I look at kind of my reading year, I've had a really excellent year. Like lots of 5 stars, lots of 4 stars, very few 3 stars and 2 stars. And a lot of my 3 stars and 2 stars were those books. When I look at that, I see it as like the books that I was trying to read to be more current, to be reading the current releases were some of the ones that I could take or leave. And maybe my goal to read these new release books kind of pushed me to books maybe I wouldn't have picked. Do you know what I mean? Like I am clearly in an era where I'm just picking books that I'm really liking. And I also don't read such a high number that I run out of good books. There's so many good books that are either coming out or have recently come out or are old favorites. You know, I'm willing to read all of those. And yes, I do enjoy being part of the current conversation, like the books that people are talking about, the books people are reading. I don't want to miss out on that, but it's hard when sometimes I realize those books are some of my worst books of the year because I've had such a fantastic reading year. Does that make sense? And so for me, this kind of experiment or this goal, I feel like pushes me to maybe not read as many new releases next year. And I think that'll be hard because the hype and the excitement is fun, but it's good to remind myself that I don't need to read those. I should just read the books that I truly feel like are going to be for me, not the books that I feel like I'm curious what other people think. But that's hard. That's hard. So we'll see where this ends up, but that was a fun kind of yearly experiment. I wanted to end this kind of in November before all the end of year content started, but I am honestly impressed with the 15 new releases I read. I mean, that's just kind of my reading style, but let me know. Let me know if you read new releases. Do you read them? Do you enjoy them? Is it something that you seek out, or are you just kind of like could care less, like I was last year? Really. So that's what I have for this video. If you want to leave me an emoji, maybe just a book stack, because this is clearly about a stack of books from 2024. Leave me that if you have nothing else to say, but otherwise please let me know your thoughts on new releases. I think it's a curious question, especially as book lovers, like where do you land? But otherwise, you guys, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next video. All right, take care.